Sometimes I envy progressive people who have faith in a loving God and a personal relationship with Jesus. God and Jesus are entities that exist in relationship to people I know and love. They provide stability and trust and love and faith and seem to diminish the fear of the future. Unitarians and Universalists began as Christians with the image of a loving God intact. I imagine that people here who feel God is on their side and those who are Christians or other types of faiths that believe in God can tap into a strength that is greater than those of us who turn to our neighbors near and far and think that we are the only ones who can create the future and save us from our own demise. We are people who both on the Unitarian and the Universalist strands of history believed in a loving God. I think of John Murray, who I preached about last spring. His story is our UU miracle story of a broken man who traveled from England in the late 1700s. He had already converted to Universalism, and he lands on the shore of New Jersey in a place called Good Luck Point. Murray preached the love of God and the goodness of humankind. Calvinism, which viewed nature as total depravity, was the prevalent religion at the time. And Murray told his congregants, go out onto the highways and byways of America, give people blanketed with decaying and crumbling Calvinism something of your new vision. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding into the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Do not push them deeper into their theological despair, but preach the kindness of an everlasting God. Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing, who was a prominent preacher in the 1800s, also brought forth this image of humans and God that was grounded in love and divinity within. He believed we had divinity within us, and he described a God who strives to make humans happy and who believes in the infinite progression of human beings. This was seen as a moral perfection of human souls. His God was different from the punitive God known to so many Christians, and he also rejected the Calvinist view of humans as fallen and broken and sinful. This sense of human nature as one of essential goodness with an agency to create a better world was prominent throughout Unitarian Universalist theology. This theology was also formed with a cornerstone of hope, grounded in an idea that there was a progress in human nature and human development. In 1985, it's kind of amazing when you think these are the 1700s and the 1800s. In 1985, Unitarian minister James Freeman Clarke outlined his 5 points of a new theology. And these were kind of broad beliefs of Unitarians at that time. The fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the leadership of Jesus, salvation by character, and the continuity of human development in all worlds, or the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. In more contemporary times, we have reflected on our history within the context of colonialism and privileges and afforded by many of our ancestors. But yet we have kind of carried forth that core belief of the inherent worth and dignity of all people, a sense that human beings are not naturally evil or doomed. We've come to recognize over time that our overly optimistic theology has lacked space for sin and evil, and so there's been much discussion lately about that as well. And we've also become more humanist, with now at least half of the Unitarian Universalists in America taking God out of the equation completely. And yet, those of us who are active in our faith communities gather with the desire to grow as meaning-making, loving, generous people who care about the world and each other. Those of us who are not theists, who don't believe in a loving God, must find another way to lean into hope and courage through other means. Doug Mooter, who often writes for the UU World magazine, says that hope is the central product of religion. We are storied people, and together we witness love and compassion, and we create stories of hope together. We've had seasons of hope throughout history when the civil rights were won and when legislative and social services were valued, were created, when people united to bend the arc of history towards greater justice. Doug writes, hope is itself a challenging issue for Unitarian Universalists because historically we've been an optimistic religion. We are a can-do people. We make plans and we project outcomes. Does this sound familiar to some of you? Sometimes we've looked down our noses at faiths that keep hope alive through prayer and praise rather than goal-directed action. In good times, when our plans succeed and goals are achieved, our way is clearly better. But in hard times, when the challenge is to endure rather than to thrive, our advantages, as he calls it, are less obvious. I've been wrestling, I know I've talked to you guys about this, with the state of my own hope and spirit lately, and I know many of you have as well. I am a constant reader, and I'm also one who listens to books and podcasts. A lot goes into my head each week, and much of it is of interest to me, but not that much really kind of stops me in my tracks. But this week, I came upon a part of a book that I've carried with me since I heard it. The book is Hunting for Hope, A Father's Journey by Scott Russell Sanders. And I'm so grateful to my colleague, Suzanne Wozlucik, I'm sure I destroyed her name, for bringing it to my attention. So in this excerpt, Sanders and his 16-year-old son take a hiking trip to the Rocky Mountains. And as they're driving between hikes, the car is filled with tension. Sanders writes, we drove in the depths of Big Thompson Canyon where the road swerved along the frothy river between sheer rock face and spindly guardrail. I could bear the silence no longer. So what are my hang-ups, I demanded. How do I ruin everything? You don't want to know, my son replied. I want to know, what is it about me that grates on you? You wouldn't understand, my son said. Try me. My son cut me a look, shrugged, and then stared back through the windshield. You're just so out of touch. With what? With my whole world. You hate everything that's fun. You hate television and movies and video games. You hate my music. I like some of your music, I just don't like it loud. You hate advertising, he said quickly, on a roll now. You hate billboards and lotteries and developers and logging companies and big corporations. You hate snowmobiles and jet skis. You hate malls and fashions and cars. You look at any car and all you think of is pollution and traffic and road-sized crap. You say fast food is poisoning our bodies and TV's poisoning our minds. You think the internet is just a scam for selling stuff. You think business is a conspiracy to rape the earth. None of that bothers you? Of course it does, but that's the world. That's where we've got to live. It's not going to go away just because you don't approve. What's the good of spitting on it? I don't spit on it, I grieve it. My son was still for a moment, and then he resumed quietly. What's the good of grieving if you can't change anything? Who says you can't change anything? Oh no, my son was still quiet, and then he had said, what's the good of grieving if you can't change anything? Or now I'm getting confused. Who says you can't change anything? You do, that's the son. Maybe not with your mouth, but with your eyes. Your view of things is totally dark. It bums me out. You make me feel like the planet's dying and people are to blame and nothing can be done about it. There's no room for hope. Maybe you can get by without hope, but I can't. I've got a lot of living still to do. I have to believe there's a way to get out of this mess. Otherwise, what is the point? Why study? Why work? Why do anything at all if it's all going to hell? Sanders wonders, had I really deprived my son of hope? Was this deeper grievance that I had passed on to him so young? My anguish over the world? Was this what lurked between us, driving us apart? A demon called despair? You're right, I finally told him. Life's meaningless without hope. But I think you're wrong to say I've given up. It seems that way to me. And if you think we're doomed, no, buddy, I don't think we're doomed. It's just that nearly everything I care about is under assault. See? That's what I mean. You're so worried about the fate of the earth, you can't enjoy anything. You come to these mountains and you bring the shadows with me. You've got me seeing nothing but darkness. Maybe you can get by without hope, but I can't. I've got a lot of living to do, is what his son had said. I have to believe there's a way we can get out of this mess. Otherwise, what is the point? Do you hear yourself in that dialogue? I do, maybe not with things I say out loud, but certainly with things I think. It's just that nearly everything I care about is under assault. I get it. And as a person with less of my life ahead of me than that which I've already lived, I can tell you that rapid change, especially rapid change which divides the rich and the poor, the old and the young, red states and blue states, that threatens the earth, it's mind-boggling. In this state of disorientation by all that is no more and all that is emerging, it's hard to feel centered and connected and assured and hopeful. The Reverend Leslie Aval Fales, a younger minister serving the congregation in Fairbanks, Alaska, calls this way of thinking as disaster porn. I hate the term, and yet I see its power. Here are her words. Losing ourselves in narratives of the worst of worst possible scenarios, what I have seen some clever folks refer to as disaster porn, will acknowledge nothing more than to sink us so deep into grief that we will have nothing left within us with which to fight. And she says, and oh my God, do we need you. We need every single one of us engaged in a way that is sustainable for the long haul. In other words, I need you to make it through tonight so that you can help me make it through tomorrow. We have to keep each other whole. In a UU World article titled The Essence of Spiritual Activism, Christine Organ says, it takes courage to muster up hope and maintain an unwavering love for humanity when the world appears to be collapsing around you. She calls this courage spiritual activism. It helps me to have a practice that grounds me and keeps my spirit alive. I hope if you have a spiritual practice that it helps ground you and keep your spirit alive, because when we feel dead inside, it is hard to muster up courage or love for humanity. It also helps to have perspective. For those of us who bought into the belief that we had reached a place in our country that more aligns with our core values, our current reality is discouraging, as what was named in the book, the excerpt I just read. And yet, our privilege gives us that perspective. People of color and other marginalized folks knew that America's promise had not been fulfilled. What we said was below the surface in the past, it was visible to them in their daily lives. Reverend Mark Worth reminds us that history has never been easy. Remember the 20th century? World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb, Stalin, the Cold War, Korea, Joe McCarthy, the Blacklist, the Berlin Wall, Vietnam, Pol Pot, and Idi Amin, lynchings and segregation, the Klan, assassins of John, Bobby, Medgar, Martin, and Malcolm. Did we think the 21st century was going to be any easier? History, and we are living history. History is not easy. Some of you may be familiar with Reverend William Barber. He leads the Moral Mondays movement in North Carolina. Reverend Barber preached at the UUA General Assembly in 2016. He is a charismatic Christian preacher, and he knows full well the reality of America, and yet he holds on to hope. He said, and this was during the Trump administration, remember, this isn't the first time that America has to deal with a racist president. This isn't the worst we have ever seen. He says, to say that would be to disregard the trail of tears that the natives faced in slavery. But when you know history, you know that's not the only side of our American story. There's another side in our moral DNA, and that is that people have always stood up. I don't want to be a person of despair. I want to be a person who lives in the here and now with less judgment and less lamenting. I want to be a person who strives to remain curious and who tries to understand, to recognize that what we hear in the news is not anything new at all. It is old news, and it's news that pulls us into this vortex of pessimism. Instead, I want to be a student of hope, finding hope, letting it feed my spirit, letting its story be more prominent in my life. Not in a Pollyannish way, but in a way that sides with those who are working for positive change and genuine connection, those who are standing up, and they are everywhere. They are. I know it doesn't always feel that way. One of the assignments in my social justice leadership program that I'm part of at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities was to watch a presentation by local artist Ricardo Levins Morales. If you haven't seen, you probably would recognize his stuff. He's kind of a social justice printmaker. He's local. If you looked him up, you'd probably recognize some of his pieces. In the video, he was talking about the topic of hope. He believes hope isn't something that you can measure or that you acquire, but it's something that you engage with. Like the son in the dialogue I shared, he believes that hopelessness is the underlying condition of society. He says despair is not an emotion. It's a signal that says there is no possibility. And because there's no possibility, there's no action. Despair is the dysfunction of our immune system. Despair is not a friend or an advisor, he says. I think it's helpful to think of despair this way. In narrative therapy, which I learned about in seminary, a counselor works with a client by externalizing obstacles and fears and the big monsters in the rooms. And the words that Morales uses to describe despair turns despair from something that is like deep within us to something that we can wrestle with or even deny. On the other hand, he speaks of hope in a much lighter term. He says we need a battery pack of hope. I kind of like that idea, a battery pack of hope, because hopefulness is about achieving a better future. We need to practice hope and be engaged with it. Hope, he said, is a committed relationship with our future. Mark Worth, who's a UU minister, I think brings it home with these words, and I'll close with these. As a Unitarian Universalist, my faith is filled with hope. We are a community of hope. The hope I experience here helps me hold on to all the good things that we share. With deep roots in a courageous past, we are now grounded in the present, in the here and now, looking with hope to the future. We have a vision of a better world that is possible. We experience the freedom of our faith, a freedom that allows us to dream the dreams, a world where diversity is respected, the earth is cherished, religion is non-dogmatic, and peace is possible. It's a moral agenda and a commitment to justice. It's a vision that we laugh and sing about, we debate, and sometimes we argue about, and a vision that we can only reach if we are together. How can we ever let go of that? He continues, there's a bit of divine, a bit of wholeness and holiness in this beautiful and broken world, and it is called hope. We each have it, and without it, we each have it, and without finding it, we can't live. It's the essence of our faith. Let us trust that hope. May it be so.